Not only was she just saying, I'm going to restrict abortion, she was calling it genocide. I mean, that breaks through.
She's like the most extreme example.
Exactly. But that breaks through to voters. We also can't act like voters aren't nuanced. Like, they can care about the price of groceries and abortion rights.
Right.
And in fact, they do.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to My Body, My Pod, a reproductive freedom podcast. I'm your host, Mini Timmaraju, President and CEO of Reproductive Freedom for All. I am thrilled today for us to do a special episode reacting and digging into the really exciting results from the Tuesday election. We saw abortion drive so many of the big wins, and we're going to unpack that with our pollster, one of my favorite people, one of the smartest in the biz, Molly Murphy, President and CEO of Impact Research. You've been doing this for 15 years, and we've known each other for a very long time, but we've been working together on repro freedom issues for the past 4 years, including the Biden-Harris and then Harris-Walz presidentials.
Yes.
So I want to talk a little bit about that. But first, big wins on Tuesday.
Huge wins. Just happy wins. It's a happy week. I think I've joked, Democrats find a way to mourn wins. But these are wins that we don't have to mourn. We just can celebrate these.
Yeah.
Yes. I just mean that a lot of times people will say, oh, but did we only win because of turnout and all of that? No, turnout was high. We swung Trump voters in these states. Turnout looked like, approaching what a midterm could look like. And abortion was a really important part of how voters in all three of the states that we looked closely at, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Virginia, of course, how they made up their minds.
And when you say we, for the listeners, we worked together on exit polls in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Virginia. So we weren't just reminding folks of the salience of abortion, as you and I have often done a lot in the last 4 years, but we're proving it.
Yes.
So let's dig right in, if you don't mind. Give us the top lines.
Yep.
And let's dig into the states.
So we went into the field. We went in actually the Sunday before the election because with early vote and all of that. But we were interviewing people who had just recently cast their ballots. And we wanted to understand, obviously, who did you vote for? But more importantly, what did you hear over the course of the campaign? How did you make up your mind? What issues were top of mind for you? And so, some of the things we found, as you would expect, voters said that they heard a lot from the candidates about costs. They heard a lot about protecting democracy, heard a lot about standing up to Trump. But in all three of these states, they also heard a lot about abortion. That was something that was really delivered to voters in all three of these states. Now, the numbers weren't even across the board. Voters heard the most about abortion in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court races, which makes sense.
Yeah. And that's been a trend in many state Supreme Court races.
That's right.
As these big cases have been litigated, as states have been defending ballot measures, as they've been trying to enforce or promulgate, the results of these big wins for abortion access.
And it was a big one after the Wisconsin Supreme Court election.
Two Wisconsin Supreme Court races.
Yes, two of them. And more recently, what I think a lot of people thought in the 2020, what year is this? 2025 Supreme Court election.
And I'm already tempted to say it's 26 because we're in it.
We're almost, mentally we are there.
Yeah.
We have to be there now that we've passed the 25 elections. But in Wisconsin, people thought Elon Musk was the biggest driver. It was actually abortion even there too, but I digress. So it was the biggest, most kind of consumed issue in those Supreme Court races, but it was also in the top tier of what voters in Virginia heard. They heard about, Winsome Sears being very pro-Trump and following Trump, and they also heard that she was going to be bad on abortion. And it's one of the things that they knew the most about when it came to her. But they also heard it in New Jersey. It fell a little bit lower compared to cost of living and utility rates in New Jersey, but it still was a prevalent issue that voters heard about. And
I'll just
it played a role in their vote.
We did paid ads ourselves attacking Winsome Earl Sears on digital, on social, on YouTube that got, really great views, and that we know were able to drive voters to pay attention to her hostility to abortion rights. So we kind of had a perfect foil in Winsome Earl Sears.
Yes.
But Virginia voters also are highly attuned to the fact that Virginia is the last southern state with abortion access. and that Governor Youngkin tried to make an issue in 23, and Democrats successfully beat back the 15-week abortion ban. So I feel like it was the spend was there. It was in all the ads. Third-party groups did a lot of content, but also Virginia voters understand this issue.
They understand it. They had her on audio. It was hard for them to escape. And not only was she just saying, I'm going to restrict abortion, she was calling it genocide. I mean, that breaks through.
She's like the most extreme example.
Exactly. But that breaks through to voters. And I think that, you and I have talked privately about our frustrations with this. The thing that drives me the most crazy is that
we can talk about it publicly now.
Yes,
Let's talk about it.
Is that we act like that voters, because in 2024, made other decisions. Abortion was, I believe, a part of how voters made up their minds in 2024. It wasn't enough. It wasn't a major enough issue. But that voters do factor this in, and it is really important to understand where the candidates are on this issue. And when you have a candidate like Winsome Earle-Sears, that is a line that voters don't want to cross, and they don't want to roll the dice on that. I mean, we asked in the survey that we did for you, how concerned would these voters be that if she had won, that she would try to ban abortion in Virginia? And 69% thought that if she had won, she would try to ban abortion in Virginia. You can't have numbers that high and say abortion wasn't relevant to voters when they were making up their minds. You've said it, so I'm stealing your words, but we also can't act like voters aren't nuanced. Like, they can care about the price of groceries and abortion rights. And in fact, they do.
So I think number one, a point that we want to hammer home is abortion is still a really important factor for voters when they're looking at candidates.
Yes.
And it's a disqualifier.
It's a disqualifier.
And being anti-abortion is a disqualifier. So that's why let's talk about New Jersey next. Even in states where it might not be in the top because the stakes are different in the state, it's still a major campaign driver because it's a great contrast point for the Democrat.
Exactly.
And Democrats are so trusted on this issue now.
It's the type of thing that I think Democrats don't have to, or I should say, Democrats are best served when they are defining the threat to abortion, not just defining that they're going to protect abortion. Say
that again.
So I think Democrats are best served when they are defining the threat of abortion in their opponent, in their opposition, in Republican groups, more so than when they are just asserting their values on abortion. Because what we have found time and again is voters vote on abortion when they believe there is a threat to abortion. And I think the answer in 2024 to why didn't abortion matter more when Donald Trump is the reason that we lost Roe is Trump was effective at telling voters, I'm not going to touch this issue.
I'm going to leave it to the states.
I'm going to leave it to the states. And so voters said, I don't have to worry about it. They didn't say, I'm not worried about it. They said, and Trump convinced them, and he won the persuasion argument in 2024. But we shouldn't surmise from that voters do not have real concerns about abortion rights being threatened, but you have to say it. And so a Democrat just simply saying, I support a woman's right to make her own reproductive decisions, I support expanding reproductive protections, that's great. Voters will say, I do too. But if you don't tell them—
And I expect you to do that anyway.
And I expect you to do it. So congratulations, why are you telling me that? I assume everybody, who's not? And so especially in these blue states like New Jersey, less blue, of course, it was a big swing in 2024, but voters don't have, if we don't tell them that there's a threat, then they're going to assume there is no threat. And so I think that it's always important that you're driving this as contrast and defining the values of your opponent when you are talking about these things. And you get much more persuasion opportunity when you're showing where your opponent is and where that threat lies than when you're just saying, hey, I'm going to protect these rights.
And we did events with, I did an event with Mikey, Cheryl, along with Emily's List. We did paid ads, phones, texts. And our biggest message was Jack Ciattarelli is actually an anti-abortion extremist. He's trying to hide it. He voted against Planned Parenthood 5 times. He supports a Trump agenda. And it was really resonant. And it helped, tell the story of who he was, to your point. We were able to define him early and often and repetitively. So, and then I think her campaign did great closing arguments around this as well. So this goes back to something you and we've done together, which is to explain to folks in our DC ecosystem that we're not saying you should run a campaign only on abortion, but you cannot win without it because it's one of our top strengths as Democrats, and it's their top weakness.
It is their top weakness. And I think that, in New Jersey, I think that one of the masterful contrast points that happened in 2025, that happened in 2022, is that, and I've talked to many reporters and people in the ecosystem who say, well, in 2022, all the Democrats won because of abortion. And yeah, sure, kind of, I'll take it. But I think what actually happened was we defined a value set and a priority distinction. Democrats said costs are too high, people are struggling. My laser focus is going to be on addressing high costs and, making it easier for people to get by. I'm going to protect your abortion rights. This guy, instead of protecting your costs, wants to take away your abortion rights. That's their priority. You've done a couple of things in that contrast. You've identified a difference in values, something that people drastically oppose, which is taking away abortion rights. And you've also indicated what you're going to do on day one and what they're going to do on day one. And voters want somebody who's going to take care of their pocketbooks. And I think what Cheryl and Spanberger were able to do through using abortion messaging was actually drive an economic argument and an economic contrast very powerfully.
So this is important because folks get tripped up on this. We're not saying, although it's true, candidates weren't saying abortion is an economic issue. They were saying, hey, these are both really important. My opponent is not prioritizing bread and butter issues because they're such a zealot.
Yes.
And they're going after your fundamental freedoms, and they want to be the party of power and control. I want to protect your fundamental freedoms. You trust me on that.
Yes.
And I'm doing all these other things.
And that's my priority. And that's my focus. I'm not going to let the other one slip either. It's not
right.
either
I'm going to protect the status
right.
quo in Virginia and New Jersey. But I'm also going to
think about your utility rates, your grocery bills, your housing prices, all of those things.
That's right. So it was a good shift. We already had the credibility on abortion. It's a top contrast issue in our favor. And then we needed to prove to them we actually still care about the economy.
Yes. And in some ways, the inverse is true from 2024, which is, again, I have so many frustrations with the way the abortion narrative has been told post 2024 in terms of what did, or that people say abortion didn't matter. It did matter. It mattered so much that Donald Trump spent money litigating this issue powerfully by basically doing the inverse of all of that, which is to say, I'm not going to touch the issue. I'm going to focus on your costs. I'm not going to take away your abortion rights at all. Every day I'm going to be fighting for your costs. He kind of did the message, right? And we say, oh, abortion didn't matter to voters. It did.
And
he just did it correctly.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I think even his playbook speaks to what we have been saying all along, which is address it, let voters know they don't have to worry about it, and then talk about the other things that also matter to voters. And instead, people took that as saying voters didn't care about abortion in 2024. It drives me insane.
They cared so much about abortion that he gave them the right message to inoculate himself.
He let them take it off the table.
And I'm going to come back to that because we did focus groups after 24 because we were trying to dig into. And I when I had Senator Gallego on, we talked about this. Like, what was the deal with those voters who voted for Trump but then voted Gallego and for the abortion ballot measure? And, his answer was very similar to what you said. He was like, I was meeting people where they were at, and I was talking about everything. Yes. And I wasn't assuming that the voters weren't sophisticated enough to want to have a complex conversation.
Yep.
And that many Democrats don't often do that, that we have a tendency to silo voters into categories 100%. And say, I'm going to talk to black voters this way, I'm going to talk to women voters about this, when he was very successful talking to Latino men, and he also talked about abortion.
Yes, completely.
So I think there's a lot of good case studies, and I want to come back to it. Let's go back to Tuesday.
Yep.
So again, Virginia, a huge driver, over 60% of voters identified this as
69% were worried that Winsome Sears would ban abortion if she had won. We also had 73% of Virginia voters heard about abortion in the gubernatorial election. So 3 in 4. And we won the voters who heard about abortion. That was the other important thing, is that voters who heard about abortion voted for these Democrats by enormous margins. So in New Jersey, Mikey Cheryl won voters who heard about abortion by 26 points. So when they're hearing about it and you're getting in front of them, they're just more likely to talk about it. 52% of voters in Pennsylvania said that they heard a lot about abortion in the Pennsylvania Senate race. And then it was a little bit, but it's 49% is still an enormous number in New Jersey, saying that they heard about abortion as part of what they heard in the gubernatorial election. And again, when you look at the numbers of people who heard about that issue, we won them by sizable double digits.
The other fact that my team surfaced for me was that in both New Jersey and in Virginia and Pennsylvania, but I'll double check. It might be New Jersey too. In the Obama closing argument ad for Spamberger, abortion was one of the issues he talked about. In the Shapiro ad for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and he was the top surrogate, he talked about abortion. So it wasn't just in the third party spend like us. Of course, we're talking about it. It was the campaigns driving this as well. And there was plenty of paid content coming from the campaigns and their top surrogates on abortion, drawing this contrast. So it feels like the good news is folks learned the lessons from 24.
I think that's right.
And they really did what you said they should be doing. So I'm going to give you some credit for that. And, we can take some credit for that. So if there is a through line through all the wins, it's affordability. Doubling down on freedom, making sure folks understood that you were on the side of protecting it and that we were defining the villain in all three cases. And I think that also helped down ballot very significantly for Jay Jones, who, we endorsed and did a lot of work for, along with our friends at Planned Parenthood. Even though he had a rocky patch, he still pulled through pretty well. And that huge win in the legislature, because Virginians understand that the legislature is going to protect those freedoms.
What we've seen, I think after 2022, places like New York and California didn't have the same level of wins or protections, I would say, as we saw in other states. And one of the theories was, well, voters who live in blue states don't worry that their abortion rights are going to go away. And I think, again, I say voters are more nuanced than that. I think what we see in a state like New Jersey is when you do see a Republican candidate for governor who has a bad choice record, and there were state legislative candidates Republicans who had awful records on abortion and Planned Parenthood and those sorts of things. Voters know they have a responsibility if they want to continue to believe that their state is a safe place for reproductive freedom, that they have to vote that way. And so I do think it helped down ballot. And I think that it was the one issue, which is why Democrats did well in these states? No, but nobody is ever successful because of one issue. Voters take in a lot of information and they make, these sort of calculated choices. And the other thing we've seen is that abortion isn't just important because of the issue itself. It signals a lot about the types of values and the types of candidates that would be against it. We've heard it in focus groups cycle after cycle, which is, I can't remember which group it was or what cycle, but sitting in a focus group and you're reading, the descriptions of the Republicans, and this particular person is anti-choice record. And one person I remember is a swing voter said, oh, they're one of those Republicans. And so it kind of puts them in more of an extreme that it makes the other extreme things more likely and more plausible. And I think Winsome Sears is a great example of that. Abortion is just one part of the thing that they really didn't like or feel good about with her. It makes it more likely she's going to follow Trump down the line or do other things that are so far out of the norm of what voters think is reasonable for a Republican. And so I think that's the other part that is really important when we're defining this. You're defining actually a deeper value set for voters that go outside the issue and can be really powerful.
That is, I think, a really key message. So, support for abortion signals a deeper set of values. It's like shorthand.
It's shorthand.
So you have to use, that's another reason why it continues to be salient.
Yes.
I think the other factor, and I had a candidate who's in a swing district say this to me recently, an incumbent, that I get how important this is, but I'm not hearing enough about it. And my constituents aren't hearing enough about it, so they don't understand the threat. So that goes back to, we've got to soften the ground going into 2026 and educate voters about the ongoing threat. And that's what we learned in the focus groups we did.
Exactly.
So can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we did focus groups We did 2 rounds of focus groups. We did some in January right before Trump took office, and then in partnership with Global Strategy Group, we did another set of focus groups over the summer that were more of a check-in. And in January, the goal was to understand what role did abortion play in 2024? Because there were a lot of takes. Obviously, Trump wins. We're all kind of reeling from what that might mean.
There were a lot of bad takes. Can we just highlight some of the bad takes that are still kind of...
There are still those bad takes. They last longer than the good takes. I don't know why. A lot of bad takes on abortion.
And they keep getting recycled. And I'll just say, I think that this is a challenge for us with, I don't want to be ageist, so I'll just say like a generation of Democrats who are from the, quote, safe, legal, and rare era.
Yeah.
And they don't, what you just said earlier about we're putting them on the defense on abortion. They're used to being
100%
on the defense. So even though we're showing them the data and we're showing them the wins, it's almost like they can't really believe it.
Yeah. I mean, in each of these, sorry to go back to these polls, but in each of these
gubernatorials,
these are good polls. In each of these gubernatorials in the post-election, we just asked a simple question: which candidate do you think is more extreme on abortion? Because Republicans do try to say up to the moment of birth,
whole
and all
argument
of those.
was, I'm for compromise. Can't we be reasonable people? We're like, yeah, sure, we can be reasonable people, but you voted against Planned Parenthood 5 times.
And by 21 points on election day or in the election window, they believed he was more extreme on abortion than Cheryl. So
but we had to educate them.
But you can't let that go unanswered because
he was trying to trump it out. He was trying to
exactly.
Reasonable people can agree.
And it did not work. And I think that's the piece. That is the kind of old mentality that we are vulnerable for being more extreme, not them. And that's just no longer the case. That is no longer the case if you're litigating it and if you are campaigning on it and you are educating voters about the issue. But we absolutely saw that attempts to soften Chitterelli did not help him. And Cheryl was viewed as the less extreme candidate on this issue by 20 points with voters who cast their ballots. So what we found in the focus group, sorry to digress there.
No, I asked you to digress because I just think, I just want to keep double clicking on, we're winning. We're the majority.
Yes.
8 out of 10 Americans are with us.
That's right.
And it's showing up in the campaigns. It's showing up in the actual data, and it's how we're winning.
Yes.
So back to the focus groups.
So in the focus groups, January, before Trump has taken office, very shortly after the election, we did focus groups. We did a mix of swing voters who had voted for Trump, and then base voters who voted. They voted for Harris. And we wanted to understand what they thought when it came to Trump and abortion and the election. And so it was a little bit look back of what do you remember hearing? What do you remember seeing? What do you think their positions were? And then a lot of looking forward on, well, what are you worried about? And the sobering reality was they really weren't worried about abortion, including our base group.
Yeah.
And, they just thought that Trump had effectively messaged, they don't use those words, but Trump had effectively messaged that he was going to leave it to the states. That was what we heard in group after group after group, that Trump said he was going to leave it to the states, so they don't think he really cares about it. They hear Trump talk about trade, and they hear him talk about the border, and they hear him talk about crime. So when you asked them, well, what do you think Trump's going to do when he gets into office? They said, I think he's going to work on trade, and I think he's going to work on the border, and I think he's going to work on crime. Trump lives out loud. Like, he is just, everything is out in the open with him, and they don't hear him talk about abortion. And so
when reporters, I remember this Kristen Welker interview, and I thought she did a really great job of nailing him on it. And he essentially was like, I'm going to leave it to the states.
Yeah, I'm going to leave it to the states. And we showed that clip in the groups because there was the part in the groups where he sort of leaves the door open to trade away abortion rights to get what he wants.
And people, I remember reading this, people believed he would do that.
They thought he would do that, but they weren't even mad about it because they were like,
that's like a classic. He's a deal
He's
maker.
Going to deal. If it's going to be good for this thing, then I think so. They didn't think that he was a protector of abortion rights. Certainly not. They didn't give him benevolent qualities on this, but they thought that he's got other things he cares about. He doesn't care about abortion. We hear him talk about the things he cares about, and this isn't one of them. And even that clip where he says, maybe if I've got, I don't remember the quote exactly, but essentially if I'm going to make a deal, it could come up that happens. And they even heard that as, maybe. I mean, he's not even sure if he's going to do it. And what we thought was very damning was actually exonerating, because it was his own admission that he had absolutely no plans to do anything with respect to abortion.
But, on a side note, I also think, and I'm curious if it came up in the groups, because the next thing I was going to say is Project 2025, so I want to come back to that. But did it come up in the groups that he's also got this Playboy personality, kind
of for the base, for sure. But yeah,
what I always hear from people anecdotally is, well, he's probably paid for a few abortions.
Yes.
So he's not an extremist.
No, they don't think he's an extremist.
They think he's like whatever they think he is, but
yes.
they can't believe he'd be aligned with an evangelical movement.
They do not think he wakes up every day
thinking about banning abortion,
scared of all the aborted, lives out there, the way these evangelicals talk about it and think about it. They think that they butter his bread, and so if it helps him,
he made a deal
to appease them, then he'll get there, but he doesn't care. And so that is, again, a shield for Donald Trump. And because he has the lock on his party, that was the other piece is, okay, so we kind of felt like we have two choices then. We can either make Donald Trump the villain because he's the one with the power.
And we tried.
And they were like, I don't think so. And one of the other things that was hard in this research is there's a long list of ways the Project 2025 bros are attacking abortion. It's, using all kinds of levers.
Right.
It's the abortion pill, it's the FDA, it's
the courts.
access, it's the courts, it's the shield laws. Like it's all of these ways. That's really complicated for voters.
Yes.
And voters also assume that if all this stuff is happening, they'd hear about it. So in some ways, having all of these things was discrediting, because they were like, how have I heard of none of this? And so we found it was really like a sticky, difficult conversation to have with them, because they almost needed to have something that was very simple and very specific and something they could wrap their heads around. But Trump still was a difficult villain. This was before he took office.
Right.
And so they also were, kind of feeling like, okay, let's give him a chance.
And blaming him for Dobbs wasn't sticking for the same set of reasons.
For the same.
Because there's multiple steps.
Yes.
And it's hard. They're like,
and Dobbs fell under Biden.
Oh my God. Can we talk about that for a minute?
Yeah.
Dobbs happened under Biden, and the number of voters we heard from who were like, well, why didn't Biden do something about it? It was under him. And oh my God, separation of
yes.
It was 3 branches of government,
yes.
Separation of powers. We have a basic civic education challenge right now.
100%. I mean, and if you if you account for the fact that, people, and it's not the fault of the voter. I will never blame the voter.
We're not trying
They're
to
going
disparage
through their
the voter.
lives. But if you see that Roe falls under Biden, you just say, why didn't they stop it? Why couldn't they do something about it? What does Donald Trump have to do with that? He wasn't even president. So if you then assume that that's a complex argument to make, imagine explaining the DOJ prosecuting shield laws from out-of-state doctors doing telehealth.
Or the FDA trying to revisit authorization of medication abortion for safety reasons.
Yes.
That sounds reasonable.
Completely, especially when not very many people are even familiar with the abortion pill. So it's just all of those things proved in this research to be incredibly complicated. And what was simple is ban. One of the things we came out of this with is restrictions can be reasonable. Restrictions can be safe. Bans were not. And so we needed to talk about bans, and we needed to keep it really simple. Like, there is a threat. The threat is straightforward. They are trying to ban abortion. Our burden isn't to give them all the nitty-gritty details. It's actually to keep it pretty straightforward. And then the other piece that was important was directing our focus on a Congress that is more faceless, has more anti-abortion. They associate being anti-abortion much more with the Republican Party.
And Mike Johnson is a good foil for us there, because he's a true evangelical. He's one of those Republicans.
Yes. And so that was much more plausible to voters. And it didn't require us to then get into this, but he said he'd leave it to the states, but he's doing this. And we've got a different villain that people don't have as firm opinions of, because we were just running into people's very strong opinions. We revisited the focus groups because obviously by the summer, Trump is president, there's chaos.
We have this huge fight over Medicaid and funding, and everything was falling apart.
Everything's falling apart. So we went back and did focus groups with swing and base voters. And It was, fortunately, Congress is still a good foil. Republicans in Congress who are coming after these restrictions. Trump still is a hard one, though, because in some ways, the chaos he creates, the absolute lawlessness of Trump, then says to them, well, if he's not following the law in any way, shape, and form, but I still have abortion rights, he doesn't care about abortion because we're raiding, schools and churches to deport people.
If he really hated abortion, he'd be raiding abortion clinics.
He would be raiding abortion clinics, right. And that's just not happening. And so, again, it's this Trump is one of one and this unique figure. The Congress is not. And the good news about 2026 is we're running against members. We're running against Republican
But we're still running
House
against
members.
Trump in a way. So let's pivot. We're now in 2026.
We're now in 2026.
And we learned a lot of lessons from this cycle, but also from the post-24 focus groups. So what's your top advice? And I know you talk to frontline candidates all across the country. On a side note, we didn't exit poll California, but we know for a fact that abortion was a driver on Prop 50 and that it was part of Gavin Newsom's closing argument. And we have just under 500,000 members there who were activated because they were so concerned about a national abortion ban, to be clear. And that was the message. So going into 2026, how are you coaching or how would you advise candidates? What should we be talking to candidates about?
So I think that really, I hate to sort of be very simplistic or go back to what I already said.
No,
but
I think we have to keep repeating it and make it simple.
I think that Virginia and New Jersey are really powerful examples of candidates who used abortion very effectively while integrating it into other messaging that also mattered to voters. Voters felt like these two candidates talked to them about the issues that mattered to them with a laser focus. And that did lead with cost. It did lead with affordability and also drove that a powerful contrast with their opponents on abortion. I think that that is likely in some of these races. It's more important to be able to say this person with a name has this specific record on abortion instead of trying to paint with a very broad and general brush.
The entire party
is doing this. Because I think if we're Chicken Little and we say the sky, like you and I both know the sky is falling. The sky is all around us. It's already crashed onto the floor.
Right.
Yeah. But, voters kind of don't, it's just really hard. The bigger you talk, the bigger, more existential the threat is, it can sometimes feel less believable because they don't feel those things in their daily lives. It's a lot better to have the specific hit, right? Like Chitterelli defunding Planned Parenthood multiple times says that's real, that's what his values are, those are his facts. So have the actual record, have the quotes, have the pieces on that opponent to drive that contrast and make that something that voters understand about them. We saw it in 2024. You and I have talked about this. Alyssa Slotkin attacked Mike Rogers over and over for his record on abortion.
Right.
And that was an incredibly important negative against him. It's not the only reason she won. She also won because he cashed in and he was a lobbyist and he sold out Michigan. But he sold out Michigan by trying to take away their abortion rights too. And she ran as, looking out for people's bottom line and keeping the country secure. But it was really important that voters knew that Mike Rogers had a very strong anti-abortion record. But it was specific to him. And we had the receipts. Be important
for folks in Michigan.
And he's running again.
And
so it still
playbook,
matters.
But we have a playbook.
And so I think that to me is the lesson, which is don't do all the things. Don't have every single thing that all the Republicans and Trump and everyone is going to do. Guilt by association, it is fine, but it is better when you can say, this is what the person said. These Republicans fill out the questionnaires. They all check the box that they want to ban
they're
abortion.
all being endorsed by these lunatics.
And they're endorsed by people who are going to do these things. But give the specifics on what it actually means in terms of abortion rights. And I would also, the emphasis on bans is a really small thing.
Well, that's why we keep saying backdoor abortion ban.
Yes.
That, restrictions on the medication abortion are effectively a backdoor abortion ban. Defunding Planned Parenthood, that is a backdoor abortion ban. And that is, I think, that's tested really well. Folks understand that.
Yes.
That you can't have an abortion if you don't have access to it, either through medication or through a clinic. So what about the role of stories? Because I'm thinking about how many swing districts are in California and New York, where folks might say, well, we're protected, we're fine. And what did we learn about the efficacy because we have this partnership with our friends at Abortion in America,
I was
where
just
we're going
gonna
to
say,
be, where we've done some of the podcast episodes have been featuring their stories. We're looking at ways to amplify storytellers. The work GSG did on the ballot measures were mostly, the ballot wins were mostly about telling first person narratives. What's the efficacy of somebody from Texas, an ad going into California saying, don't let this happen in California?
So storytellers are the most powerful messengers there are. I think that sometimes, obviously as a pollster, I would advocate any campaign do research on where are voters starting on this, because I think your entry point always has to meet people where they are. I think they're really important, and they're starting different places.
Just we saw this week, Virginia's starting in a different place than New Jersey.
100%. We've done in the work we've done for you, we look at states that have bans and restrictions versus states that don't. There's broad support that is not different by state for protections. Perception of threat, though, very, very different. So,
and that goes to defining the opponent.
Yes. And so I think that understand what your entry point is. Are you needing to tell people, don't let California be Texas, because you know that Californians aren't worried about their abortion rights? Or are you communicating that, even in California, some of these policies and restrictions have made it so that people can't get abortion, right? So even some of the nuance. What I will say is across the board storytellers are your best messengers. They do a couple of things. One, they take this out of a political conversation very quickly. This is real. These are real threats. This is danger. And I think a lot of times people can get a little numb to politician says this about other politician, and they care about the facts. But at some point, they can't look
away at a young woman on camera saying, this terrible thing happened and I didn't have the freedom to decide to make my own choices about my body.
Completely. And it feels less political. And I think the other challenge we know we're facing in so many places is urgency, that voters would love to prioritize abortion if they didn't feel like other things were more dire in their lives. And so we have to
their
crank
SNAP
up
benefits or their ability to have Medicaid coverage or their
pay
ACA
their rent,
premiums.
100%.
Right. So we'll be competing with that.
We're competing with that. And one of the ways you compete is by showing urgency. We can't wait. If we wait, then more instances like this are going to happen with somebody
more women are going
is
to die.
Denied medical care. Someone is going to die. And storytellers do that really powerfully. And I was happy and just so honored to work with Abortion in America in testing these storytellers.
Yes.
And it is, you're also, there's urgency, and then there's the economy for attention. A lot of the voters are, not watching, traditional news all the time. They're getting these things on social media. What is going to make them stop and watch an entire video about abortion? And what we do know is that a politician at a podium talking about it is going to get scrolled through very quickly, but someone who sounds like you and looks like you and lives, a life that looks similar to yours feels very different. And you can see yourself in that and say, okay, maybe that's me, or maybe that's my best friend, or that's my daughter, depending on age. And it kind of it grabs your attention a little bit more. And so, what the storyteller specifically is saying, whether don't let it be Texas, or whether they're saying, I actually live here and I never thought this could be me, but that's where our laws are, or any of those things, I think they're always powerful and important.
Yeah, because even in California, the Attorney General, Rob Bonta, had to recently go after a Catholic hospital in rural California for denying care, even in California. So it's important to have an Attorney General who shares your values, is going to defend what's in your state constitution.
Right. And Medicaid cuts affect every state.
Yeah.
And that's going
California's
to shut down.
Going through it.
Right. That's going to shut down a lot of provider clinics, to your point on backdoor abortion. So maybe it isn't that the state's laws are the problem. It is the cuts. It is the targeted attempt, and who's going to be
on your side and get your back in the middle of this chaos.
Yes.
So I think our time is up. We're going to definitely do this again.
Yes, I would love to.
Because we're going to continue to do this research.
Yep.
But I also think there's lots of important lessons we have to share with our colleagues in the world.
We do.
But Molly, if you were to summarize, what are your top thoughts on what you want people to take away from this conversation?
what I want people to take away from this is that abortion matters to voters. It's so simple. It's
not a social issue that needs to be on this list over here.
It doesn't go on a special list for special types of voters, and we only say it to a niche group of voters, and we don't say it anywhere else. Abortion matters to voters. That does not mean, and the other thing I would say is that abortion also isn't a cure-all for a candidate's other problems. And oftentimes, when it gets thrown under the bus, it's when nothing else is working, and we also happen to advertise on abortion, and we say, well, we tried that and we lost.
It didn't save the campaign.
Yeah, voters didn't believe that the Democrat was going to be good on costs or good on values or knew the struggles they were facing. Abortion was maybe the only thing that got it close, but yet we blame that. So voters do care about abortion. They use abortion as a values assessment of where the candidates stand and a threat assessment in terms of what it means for their lives. But nobody is saying that abortion is the only issue that is going to make up the minds of voters. And so we should not abandon abortion messaging. We abandon it to our peril, but we also need to be smart about making sure that voters understand the full picture of what these candidates stand for.
And they want to have those conversations.
Yes.
Molly Murphy, thank you.
Thank you for having me. This is fun.
This was fun. And thank you for joining us. You can find this podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, YouTube, Spotify. We are posting clips on TikTok, so follow us there as well.